Hello, this is Ryanne Davis, and this is my yearly submission for the Associate Trainer Program. Here I am riding Ariel, who is a 20-year-old Arabian who I've been doing Art2Ride with for about 3 or 4 years at this point. This is a full-length riding session where I am working on actually allowing her to truly and totally relax. I hadn't filmed her in a little while because she was starting to show signs of growing a bit flustered, I think, in the work. Nothing very dramatic, but she just started getting a little quick in her step. She'd kind of rush and move a bit more hurriedly. I could hear her tail periodically swish. The steering wasn't quite as easy and fluid as it usually was. And she'd tuck her nose towards her chest a little bit more. She still had a long neck and wasn't totally cranked over, but I could kind of tell that she just wasn't quite able to get totally comfortable into the bits. You can feel it as a rider when the horse ducks behind the vertical because, at least with her, the sort of pressure on the reins would kind of vanish. Suddenly it would feel like there's no horse there on the other end. The positively charged sort of sensation of the connection would be lost. It's like a switch gets flipped, and the further behind the vertical she goes, the less and less available the hind end is to power her forward. And Ariel had been drilled to pin her nose to her chest for much of her life as a riding horse before Art2Ride. So it has been one of our biggest hurdles together to retrain and rehabilitate that habit and wound, so her hind end can become and remain fully accessible. We've had to spend all these years stretching all the way out and down and reinforcing her reaching forward into the bit instead of ducking back so that she can unlock and access the entire length of her top line, which allows her hind leg to step as deeply underneath her as possible and support her mobility. So anyway, we have spent quite a few years stretching out and unlocking her back and hind end, and so we kind of got to this pivotal point where we were beginning to explore some canter work, sustaining working frame for longer and longer periods, even exploring half pass a little bit, and things were really feeling like they were progressing. So I felt able to keep asking for more and more and explore more and more, and consequently pushing her further and further and getting a little greedy. And it didn't take long before she wasn't just quiet in her mouth on the bit. She would start fussing a little bit and shake her head more frequently, which is something she used to do quite a bit early on when she was first beginning Art2Ride as a way to release tension. And she would sort of fishtail a little bit and not be quite as fluid and easy to steer as she typically was. And she would rush her step, like I said, especially at the walk. And her step would just feel slightly more choppy and strained underneath me rather than smooth and silky and effortless. I had grown quite accustomed through riding her in a stretch that every day movement seemed to become easier and easier, and so she gave any new request a very eager try and seemed more and more happy to be ridden, and she was so enjoyable to ride. So when these little behavioral signals started popping up, I reflected and realized that I had this kind of belief that since I had spent so many years riding her in a deep stretch, that she should be ready to perform more advanced movements under saddle somewhat consistently, which ultimately, I realized was totally unfair of me to expect. She is a 20-year-old horse, which is no spring chicken, so she certainly has a tremendous amount of habits and ways of using her body that she has developed over the years that she needs to take a lot of time to adjust and recalibrate. So I decided to take a giant step backwards and just let her dictate how the lesson is going to go. and how far she's going to go, and give her the option that if I asked for a little more or for something more advanced, she could say no, and I could say, yep, you're right, that's not appropriate for today, and just move on, forget about it. Just go back to basics, which is just stretching and moving along. So I've completely backed off, let go of all my expectations, and am allowing her to go very slowly here and warm herself up exactly as she is ready to. So you can see that she's doing a lot of yawning as we get started here, and that's because she has built up just a little bit of tension in her body during the period that I was expecting and pushing a little too far. So again, I had to back off and allow her the time that she needed to work this little bit of tension out of her body again. So it turns out she really needed to take quite a few steps backwards in her training and truly take her time to stretch out fully and make herself comfortable. So I really like here that she's willing to simply move forward, as slow as she may be. At least she's not rushing. And she's willing to poke her nose out in front of her and seek contact with me and really relax and melt into the work and settle into a steady rhythm. And these are all things that I really cherish when I ride any horse, especially Ariel. And again, these qualities were just beginning to kind of slip away from our rides together. And unfortunately, I didn't film any of the rides where she was beginning to fuss a little because, well, to be perfectly honest with you, I was a bit embarrassed. This is supposed to be a horse that's been doing this for several years and should be really well developed and begin being able to perform at a higher level. So I was embarrassed and a little perplexed that she wasn't further along. So I wasn't filming any of that because she was no longer able to ride along with the lovely relaxation and ease that I love to feel and see and show with her. So anyhow, I wish now that I did go ahead and film those times and could show that to you now, because you would be able to actually observe exactly what I'm referring to. And again, it wasn't anything super dramatic, but just, these little signs and sensations that I felt from her while I was on her that I was sensitive to. So anyway, this is really nice. Again, she's really slow here, but that's okay. That's the way she needs to be here for right now. I have to keep faith that she will eventually offer a nice active step when she's able to, as she loosens up. But I also have to remember that an active step is not about speed or animation. It's actually a slower, deeper step underneath the body, which takes longer in time, which is why most horses slow down significantly when they begin to discover and unleash their optimal stride. If the horse is moving quickly, the step under the body has to be shorter. There's just not as much time to take the longer, deeper, fuller step underneath the body. So I can always feel with Ariel when she's not taking her deepest, fullest, most optimal stride, because she starts to get speedy and her legs seem to kind of get ahead of her or away from her a bit, like she can't quite keep up with herself, so she's placing one hoof in front of the other just to kind of keep up with her own momentum. Her step doesn't feel as controlled. So here she starts to loosen up a bit as we begin thinking about trotting, and so you can see that she certainly can gradually offer an active step and doesn't have to remain slow and lethargic for the entire time, but again, if I push her too far too soon, these small resistances begin to manifest, like curling behind the bit a little bit like she does right there. So I am definitely compelled to take it slow, and I am finding with older horses that they do seem to need to spend a lot more time going slower than some of the younger horses. But even the younger ones, when they first start stretching, tend to slow down significantly as well. They just might become freer and looser in their bodies more readily than an older horse might in any given session. And each horse is certainly an individual, and so it can be difficult and perhaps dangerous to make these sweeping generalizations, but But I do find that this is a general pattern. So I'm not showing a younger horse here today because, for this particular yearly update, I wanted to showcase the horse that I have been doing this work with the longest, to truly show you where I am at as a trainer of Art2Ride and show you what my sort of most veteran Art2Ride horse and I are working on these days. So I wish I could show you something super cool that we've gotten to, our canter work, or even higher level working frame headset, or half pass, or something incredibly exciting, but alas, she was not ready to show those type of exciting things by the time of this update. So today is rather boring and uneventful, but I really do believe that it is important to show that a horse isn't necessarily going to be able to perform at their absolute peak every single day and exceed that peak every single day. Even if, they are progressing in a positive direction and developing really nicely, there are going to be tons of days when you're just going to have to go back to just stretching and flowing and nice big circles and not trying to think about the working frame or canter or always thinking about the next biggest thing you're going to do all the time. And instead you just have to be gracious and grateful to have a nice relaxing meditative ride where the horse can just stretch and really get the full length of her neck and the full length of her back, really reaching and lengthening, and really appreciate that she's not bucking you off or, refusing to move or running away with you or being difficult in any way. The two of you can just flow onward without half a care in this world. It is, this time spent doing exactly this, just stretching and moving, that is going to prepare the horse to be able to perform the exciting higher level things like canter and half pass and pee off and will allow you to be able to push them too far and then remind yourself to scale back again. So, we're going to have to spend the majority of our time, more time than we may wish, doing exactly this boring stuff that I think, as humans, sometimes we can find it boring. I genuinely find these kind of days extremely calming and comforting. I feel like I don't have to think about the aids that I'm giving or what the horse is doing or what we need to work on today or impressing anybody with these big, huge strides in our training. So I find it incredibly soothing to be able to ride a horse like this and just just go in circles around the arena. But I know for a lot of people, this kind of simple work can be pretty boring. I notice some people will say things like, I feel like my horse is bored, and how do I make things more interesting during our lesson, and to that sort of thing, I would say, you might be bored, but, it's probably not your horse that's bored. I don't think that horses actually get bored the way that humans do. We are predatory creatures, and so, as predators, we seek stimulus. We like to see what's going on and be involved in things and process new incoming information, Stimulus generally is exciting, and we see it as a good thing, for the most part. But for a horse who is an herbivore and prey animal, a lot of stimulus is generally a bad thing. It means they need to be on high alert and worry about what's going to try to eat them, right? So they'd much rather be bored. That means that life is good and they are safe. If they just have one thing to do, one thing on their mind, or nothing on their mind, They really like it when life is as easy and simple as possible. So you might be bored, but I assure you that your horse is enjoying the boredom of having a ride like this, just relaxing and flowing forward consistently and calmly, not doing any big changes in directions or putting poles in front of her or going around cones or a bunch of obstacles. That sort of stuff can get quite overwhelming and overstimulating for a horse, again, as a prey animal. So I wouldn't recommend putting a whole bunch of stimulus in the arena for your horse to sort through while trying to relax over their back and develop the correct muscling, because it's going to be too much. And while you might feel like you're accomplishing something, this is generally going to panic a horse to some degree, big or small. I think if you are able to give them the time to relax in an empty arena and melt into their work, and then introduce any obstacles and stimulus, individually, slowly over time, kind of work your way up, and the horse, remains calmly over their back and relaxed and willing to stretch and address this new stimulus, then certainly, yeah, you can have obstacles in the arena that you can successfully ride around. But if you just throw a bunch of stuff out there, because you're understimulated, and then you try to ride around or over or through these things, it's probably not going to go too well. You could be setting yourself and your horse up to run into frustration, and then you may just end up feeling tempted to force your horse to do whatever it is, and then your horse, might do it or not, and then may not want to come back out the next day because it was just overwhelming and unpleasant for them. So again, you have to listen to your horse, like I figured out that I had to do, and went ahead and changed course, and kind of gave up completely. So instead of promoting my own agenda onto the horse and expecting certain things from her, she gets to be the one to let me know what she can handle and what she's willing to do and what she's comfortable doing, and what she's physically and psychologically capable of doing. And so today, this is what she is physically and psychologically able to do. So absolutely nothing wrong with that. And so another thing that I have been allowing for with her is letting her decide if she needs to take a break. She can't always keep reaching and going further and further all the time. Every now and again, you'll see that she might transition back down to a walk. And before I would ask her to kind of push through that, but I've stopped doing that. I actually will allow her to go ahead and take a break and catch her breath. And, when she's ready to trot, she will. She really enjoys spending time trotting. There used to be times when I would actually ask her to start transitioning back down to a walk, and she would just keep trotting for quite some time before finally coming back down. So I know if she's asking to walk, it's because she is physically no longer able to sustain the trot in that moment. Her muscles have started to become fatigued or sore, and signal to her that she needs to take a break. So I have to be accepting and cognizant of her request and her needing to take a break and refresh herself and refresh her step. So anyway, you can see here that she is wonderfully consistent into the contact, keeping her mouth closed around the bit and taking it forward and not ducking behind the vertical. Her eyes are kind and soft. And her head kind of bobbling along there. So this is really nice and exactly what I love to see with this girl. because she really likes to meditate and flow and not really be asked much, she becomes so agreeable to ride that, it can become all too easy to push her beyond her capabilities. So she's starting to loosen up and open up a bit here. You can witness more of a spring in her step as she bounces along and bobbles her head a bit as her pole unhinges and succumbs to the movement traveling through her body. And so that is all super nice and brilliant to see. She is freeing up beautifully here and beginning to step a bit more actively and deeply under her body to continue her forward flow. So you can see that she's got a little bit more of an active step. The hind leg is going underneath her body a little more deeply if you compare to how she was first walking in the beginning of this session. You can observe throughout her body that she's more mobile and loose, swinging a bit more freely throughout her body, and that is precisely what I'm looking for when I'm looking for activity. I'm looking for the entire body to look like it's all just flowing together as a smooth unit. Like moving forward is remarkably easy and effortless. She's just rolling along, and you can see her shoulder swinging back and forth, and her hips swaying back and forth, and a little bit of a nod in her head as she goes, and her pole loosens. So I just really love to see this sort of effortlessness and ease as the horse moves along, and a willingness to continue moving forward consistently and rhythmically. I like when the horse sets her own rhythm and just keeps going at that, just flowing onward. So another thing that sometimes people have a little bit of a concern about is all of this dust that you see around us here. I live in the Southwest, so I'm out in the desert where there is constant dust. And this past year was especially dry, so it's especially dusty. And unfortunately, it's not at all practical for us to water the arena. Water is really precious out here, and anyway, as soon as you put any water onto the dirt, it either evaporates right back into the air or the ground sucks it right up. So the arena won't stay moistened for very long. So it's really just not worth it to waste all of that water. So if you have a dusty arena, that's okay. Actually, riding Art2Ride style is the best way to ride in these kinds of dusty conditions, because you can use nature to be able to deal with it. You'll notice, she never coughs, or she blows every now and again, but the dust really doesn't bother her. And the reason that is because when she's in this position with her head low and her neck stretched out, the dust actually doesn't go up her nose so much, because the mucus that's in her nose can flow downwards and outwards, and that helps to trap the dirt before it gets in, and any dirt that does happen to get into her nostrils can easily just flow downward away from her nasal passages again, so that she doesn't have to, get a whole bunch of dirt trapped in her airways. If you're riding a horse with their head way up in the air, it's counterintuitive, but they're going to be more prone to get dust in their nose and be more likely to be blowing much more and perhaps coughing as well, since gravity isn't as effective in a high-headed position to pull the mucus down to coat the nostrils and create that barrier and escort the dirt particles back out. So we can use nature to our advantage here in this challenging sort of situation with the dust by having her head and neck reaching and lengthening forward and downward, and her nose actually in the dirt. We can use that full advantage of gravity to pull the mucus down and to allow her to be able to breathe easily without breathing in much dust. So you don't have to worry so much about your horse breathing in too much dirt and coughing and such, because when you ride them in a deep stretch, you're allowing the horse to be in the best possible position to handle this dusty situation. So it's truly a beautiful thing to ride this way in more ways than one. So for all of you that I know are seeing this and thinking, oh my God, look at all that dust, yeah, we can't help it. And so riding in a deep stretch is how we can deal with all of that dust. So Anyway, so back to Ariel here. I'm just focusing on letting her be consistent, find a rhythm, find a stretch, seek contact with me, maintain that contact with me, and then just thinking about my own position and stretching up and being nice and soft in the saddle, letting my hips come up underneath me as I post, letting my hands stay soft and allowing my elbows to flexibly move and adjust to follow the contact with the horse. And this all makes it easier for Ariel to meet me at the end of the rein and feel like she has the full length of her neck available to her, so she doesn't have to consider tucking backwards. Again, this is a very easy horse to pull backwards. She has an unbelievably gentle mouth and is not assertive with the reins by any means. I do work with a couple of horses who are more pulley and will yank the reins out of your hands, and she is not one of those horses. If anything, you just have to barely just pull a little, and she'd immediately tuck her nose and give away those reins way too easily. So to get her to stand up to the contact and really poke her nose out there and carry the bit forward and take full responsibility to hold up her 50% of the weight of the rein and sustain that, feels like a major accomplishment. So I really cherish when we can achieve that like we are here. So it certainly has to feel so much better than having her neck pinned to her chest. I mean, you can visibly see the tension in her neck when she does that, which she's not going to do today, but I think I have examples of that in previous submissions of her early Art2Ride days. She developed this kind of a sort of a what I could describe as like a gooseneck, a little bit of a bump there in the middle of her neck top line where she was bent over, and that has pretty much entirely gone away. There's still little remnants of it left if you look really closely. But that can all heal with this kind of work. This stretching is exactly what you need to do if your horse has any type of tension in their neck from being pulled over. She also used to have quite a severe hunter's bump at the top of her hips. There's still a little bit of it left still today. And again, that's primarily due to being such an older horse with such deep habit patterns. A lot of the positive physical changes take a long time to fully occur. It's been 16 years of her riding upside down and totally hollow with her nose pinned to her chest and her back clenched. So that's several years worth of riding that you have to undo and then redo and rebuild the correct muscling so that, that's going to take time to develop all of that solidly. It certainly does not happen overnight. And many horses, will change kind of drastically in just 1 year with consistent and frequent work. But they're not necessarily going to fully physically change entirely for maybe another several years. So these things take enormous time. And and this horse practices Art2Ride, 5 or 6 days a week, and still has a ways to develop. So you can still see a little bit of a bump there at the top of her hips behind the saddle. It's certainly rounded out compared to when she first started several years ago, but again, it might not be a few more years possibly before she's fully developed her back so that it comes all the way up underneath the saddle nicely and there's no dip behind the saddle. And two, for her hips and buttocks to be nicely formed and fully rounded. I feel like all of that rear end gluteus stuff is kind of the last to develop. Her neck certainly has been what seems to me to be the first to kind of take shape, and you can see nice robust muscling there at the top of her neck, and the underside of her neck is relaxed and much thinner and sort of narrower than the top of her neck. And that's exactly what we want to see. A horse that's been ridden hollow will have the reverse of that, and the muscling on the underside of their neck will be noticeably larger, and the top portion of their neck will be thin and narrow. Because when they're hollow and have their backs clenched, they really have to rely on their shoulders to pull themselves along. And so these underside neck muscles become more pronounced, and the top line, becomes minimally involved and therefore doesn't develop much density. The horse relies more and more on their forehand to propel them forward, rather than starting to develop the hind end to push them forward, and so their hind end gets a bit left out behind them and can't come up underneath the center of the horse to push up through the horse's back and lift the back up. The back sort of sinks downwards instead, and of course all horses are naturally forehanded, and that seems to serve them just fine out in the wild without any humans riding them. But as soon as you put a human up there and the horse moves around for a sustained amount of time with their back clenched and hollow, driving themselves even further onto their forehand all the time, the horse is going to quickly end up with soreness in their back and throughout their body. And many horses will quietly take on that pain and keep going and allowing themselves to be ridden, because they are incredibly gracious creatures. And plus, a horse with complaints about pain tend to be the next one to be eaten, right? So their instinct is to hide, ignore, not demonstrate their pain. But some horses will respond to this chronic pain by, sort of acting out, and demonstrating undesirable behaviors like pinning their ears, swishing their tails, biting or kicking, sometimes rearing or rubbing us off on the fence line, or refusing to move, or simply running away and not listening or obeying the rider's commands, or in very severe cases, bucking us off. And these things, injure us and or our horses to varying degrees and varying scenarios, and are certainly behaviors that I personally seek to avoid myself. Caring about my own longevity as a rider, I'd really like to be able to ride to my grave, so to speak. So I am not at all interested in bucking a horse out or riding any really risky, super green horses that are unpredictable and unhappy. Art2Ride has honestly given me a sense of security riding horses, even though certainly anything can happen at any moment. If something did, it would actually surprise me, versus if I were to get on a horse who hasn't been allowed to stretch deeply and relax, I would almost expect something bad to happen. Again, it's generally riskier to get on a horse who hasn't been stretching compared to one that has, since they have less body awareness and confidence and comfort. All they really know is that they're in pain, and that the rider on top, amplifies that sensation of pain, and but they don't necessarily know how to feel better, or they're not permitted to move in a way that makes themselves feel better, because the rider, feels that she needs to hold the horse's head up in order to feel safe riding this horse, who will probably act out, which sends the horse further into pain, and the rider's reins get tighter and tighter, and it becomes this sort of horrible catch-22 loop. So, I'm actually not too sure how anyone could enjoy riding that way. I certainly didn't before I discovered Art2Ride, which is what drove me to seek out a method such as Art2Ride. And I would never go back to riding that way. People often ask me how I could possibly be comfortable riding my horse without being able to see their head. Don't I feel like, I'm going to fall forward and slide down their neck? Or, how can I tell what the horse is thinking when I can't see their ears or eyes as I ride? Or, don't they put their head down like that before they buck? And I can understand all of these concerns, and, it can take a little getting used to, but once you experience the benefits of riding in a stretch, you will probably wonder how you ever felt comfortable riding a horse with their head way up in the air. I feel more uncomfortable riding a horse who doesn't stretch than one who does. After riding this way for just a few years, it feels perfectly natural to ride with the horse in a deep stretch, because everything about riding all becomes so much easier when the horse is willing and able to stretch deeply and consistently, because you don't have to fight with them to achieve anything. So it's really worth any temporary uneasiness in the beginning with not being able to see the horse's head. Every single time with every single horse, This has yet to fail me. And I haven't been bucked off of a horse since well, I don't know. It's been a long time, which is exactly how I like it. So anyhow, again, we are just taking it nice and simple here today. Nothing impressive to show. I don't even think I sit the trot today. We're just sticking to the extreme basics, just walking and trotting in the stretch and going in nice big circles, and that's it. A few like yields here and there, whatever, she can do easily. So you can see as she goes by here, she's nice and soft in her eyes and face. She's really content to be ridden and, is starting to have a little bit more swing through her body as well. So you can see if you compare, again, to earlier in this session when she was going really, really slowly, you can see she's starting to have a little bit more pep in her step and beginning to become a little bit more mobile. You can see her shoulders starting to swing together with her hips as they synchronize into a really nice rhythm here. And so this is really nice. She just seems like she's easily able to move over the ground, and so that's really fine and dandy, and really all I could wish for. So you can also witness her hind legs have become sort of unhinged and kind of sweep underneath her body in a nice large step to continue propelling her forward. Good girl. So here she is, as active as she can be for today in the walk, and again, activity being that deep step underneath the body rather than any sort of animation or speed. So that's exactly what I'm looking for. She looks like she is just going somewhere here, just rolling along, and she's going much more fluidly than she was when she first started, and that's exactly all I'm looking to accomplish today. This sort of unlocking and unleashing of her body so that she can simply move fluidly and freely. And so that is beautiful for today, and what I've been looking for, to achieve in all of my rides with her. Just because, again, I'd kind of pushed her a little over the edge, and so that's my fault for getting too enthusiastic. So, I had to take steps backwards, and as embarrassing or frustrating or baffling as that might be as a rider, I have to give the horse a chance and give them all the time that it takes. I really cannot be in any hurry or get ahead of myself. Development really doesn't happen linearly. It's much more cyclical. It's like, you kind of take steps forward and then you kind of circle back, and then you progress forward again and circle back. And so that's all very normal and very good. It all counts. So I just try to remember to be very patient and very understanding and sympathetic. How would I feel if I was a, I don't know, mid-aged person trying to change the way that I use my body after having years and years of habits that I had developed over time? What would that be like for me? And that's what you have to consider with your horse. You have to sympathize with what they're doing and what they're trying and what you're both trying to get to. And so the development all happens on its own. The activity all happens on its own. But you have to get the relaxation first. It doesn't happen without the relaxation. So you have to bring out the willingness of the horse for them to be able to develop themselves. And so that's what we have been working on lately. So here is Ariel and I, and we are happy to show you this very boring but very necessary and beneficial lesson today. So thank you all so much for watching, and we will certainly see you for the next one with hopefully something more fun and thrilling to show. So I hope this has been helpful to you if you are experiencing any sort of hiccup in your training. Just remember to take it easy. don't be afraid to back off, and back up. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. So that's nice. A lovely stretch of the neck out there while she gets a treat. Really good. I always try to give her a little something in the end, a little piece of fruit or something, just to reinforce that she's such a good girl. This is one of my favorite horses and has taught me so much about Art2Ride, and I am incredibly thankful to her for letting me make mistakes and correct my mistakes. I truly could not have asked for a more forgiving and patient teacher than I have found in this horse. So, again, this is Ryanne Davis, Associate Trainer for Art2Ride, and Ariel and I certainly look forward to seeing you next time.